In this video, we're going to begin talking about constructive trust. And specifically, I want to answer the question of what is a constructive trust? So, a constructive trust arises by operation of law, at least in English law. So, this indicates two things. Firstly, that the constructive trust is imposed by a court in accordance with the established principle and not purely at the court's own general discretion. So, this English constructive trust is dubbed an institutional constructive trust, which means that a constructive trust comes into existence automatically from the date of the defendant's knowledge of her unconscionable act, and that the court is merely recognising its existence as opposed to creating it out of some general discretion. And we can compare this institutional constructive trust with the discretionary or remedial constructive trust used in the United States. The second point is that a constructive trust is imposed regardless of the intentions of the parties involved. Okay, so while there are circumstances in which the constructive trusts are enforced in accordance with the intention of one or other of the parties, but without the necessary intention or formality to create an express trust, in many circumstances, the constructive trust is imposed on the defendant without the need for her consent, as to prevent the defendant from acting unconscionably. So, in that sense, the constructive trust may be imposed contrary to the parties' intentions. The term constructive trust itself arises from the fact that the court construes that the defendant is to be treated as a trustee of the property. It is in this sense, then, that we say that a constructive trust does not accord with the intentions of the parties because it may be imposed by the court contrary to what the parties may otherwise have wished if the court considers that to be an appropriate response to the defendant's unconscionable behaviour. Okay? So as I said, it can arise irrespective of the intentions of the parties, but it is possible to bring them about by creating a situation in which they arise. There are no well-defined circumstances in which a court will determine a constructive trust. So a constructive trust, they are not expressly created by the settler. They are created by the law, and the court will decide if they exist. So there are no well-defined situations where a court will determine there is a constructive trust. But there are still some common circumstances in which constructive trusts have been found. Weak unifying factors to all circumstances include conduct of the legal owner. So has the legal owner so conducted himself that it would be inequitable to deny the claimant an interest in the property? So when looking at the situations where the constructive trusts have been found, there are often circumstances which are common to all of them, and usually the legal owner has conducted himself in such a way that it would be unconscionable for them to maintain the property. So to deal with unconscionability, we've allowed for constructive trusts to be developed. Thus, a person who steals property will have dealt unconscionably with it. A person who receives a bribe in the conduct of a fiduciary office will have dealt unconscionably with the property representing that bribe. A person who takes property by means of fraud will have dealt unconscionably with it, and so on. So in each of these situations and many others, the defendant is held to be a constructive trustee of the property because she has knowingly dealt with that property in an unconscionable manner. And we've got a couple of quotes here. So Millett says that a constructive trust arises by operation of law whenever the circumstances are such that it would be unconscionable for the owner of property to assert his own beneficial interest in the property and deny the beneficial interest of another. And we've got Justice Cardozo, who says that a constructive trust is the formula through which the conscience of equity finds expression. Okay, and he's a well-known American justice. So finally, in this very short video, I want to talk about the distinction between personal and proprietary claims. So it is vital that we make this distinction. A proprietary constructive trust will give a right to the beneficiary in specifically identifiable property. Okay, so that is a right in the property held by the constructive trustee, which is enforceable against any other person. Okay? The alternative is merely an in personam right against a constructive trustee to make that trustee personally liable for any loss suffered by the beneficiary. That is, a right to recover an amount of money from the constructive trustee equivalent to the value of the property at the time when the constructive trust came into existence, but not any right in any identified property. So, in this context, it is best to think of the office of trustee under a constructive trust being imposed on a person who has acted unconscionably. The way in which equity may deal with the constructive trustee may differ in different circumstances. So, equity may require that the defendant holds specific property on the terms of a proprietary constructive trust, or alternatively, it may require that the defendant is simply made personally liable to account for some loss suffered by the beneficiaries, depending on the type of constructive trust at issue. Okay, so that is just a really quick introduction into constructive trust, and I'm going to be diving right into this in a lot more depth over the next few videos. So make sure you stick around, but if you have any questions at all, then please leave your questions and comments below and I'll get straight back to you. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching.